Most people don't know that there are such a thing as Confucius Institutes. Most people don't know the real ideology of the communist regime in China. Today, the communist regime in China has combined the worst of two ideologies. The total repression of the communist idea, but they have left part of Marxism because China is now not even a market economy, or it's not a planned economy. It's a raw capitalist economy where there are no legislation protecting the individual or the company. So anything can happen if the Communist Party decides to do this or that way. And this ignorance is dangerous. And if we don't have our universities being free and open for discussion, we're in very big trouble for the future. Same thing goes for the schools, high schools. If you have Confucius involvement in high school classes, you'll indoctrinate the kids from the very beginning. That was the idea of Hitlerjugend in Germany during the Nazi time. That was the idea of the pioneers in the Soviet Union. And you have similar organizations that are instead of the Boy Scouts, which promote good ideas, but you have organizations that promote the state or party ideas. Well, in the 1930s we had Mussolini setting up Italian language institutes all over Europe and other parts of the world. The Confucius Institutes are about the same. They are spy centrals and propaganda centrals, nothing else. The main purpose is to indoctrinate people and to gather information for the totalitarian regime. These are the two main goals that are not outspoken. And with budgets reduced, a lot of universities have been interested in having Confucius Institutes paying for the education in Chinese language, Chinese culture, and all these things. Same in the 30s with Mussolini's language institutes. There is a difference between other institutes from other countries because they are separate. These Confucius Institutes are integrated into the universities. So there is an excellent opportunity to do infiltration work and also spying on the same time, indoctrinating the students in the communist thinking. And all the teachers for the Confucius Institutes are of course controlled from Beijing. And this is bad. I was a student politician in the 60s and we were very keen on keeping the academic freedom. And I think it's time we restore the academic freedom. Whether it's Confucius Institutes or whatever it is, even if it's a big company that is sponsoring some kind of research, it is a bit tricky. You have to know who you're dealing with and where the money comes from. For example, if the cigarette maker Philip Morris is sponsoring research on tobacco, I wouldn't trust that research. And the same thing here. You have infiltration and research on what's going on here and there in China. And if you have people coming from the regime, you shouldn't trust them. The Goethe Institute and all the other institutes, they are independent. They are not located inside the university. The idea of the Confucius Institute is to infiltrate inside and be part of a faculty in an established university. And that's make them more dangerous because then they are a danger for the academic freedom. The other institutes, they are located separately. And there's no problem if you have an organization you know it's foreign and it promotes its country. That's normal. You have democracies doing that. You have dictatorships doing that. You have the Azerbaijan Society in London. It promotes Aliyev and Azerbaijan's regime. No problem with that because you know who you're dealing with. Problem is if you're in a university and you don't know really who is behind. That's dangerous. It's only because you have a lot of people who don't know. There is very little knowledge about the communist atrocities committed in Europe, about the communist atrocities committed in Asia. Especially if we go 20, 30 years back, there is very little knowledge among the general population. education in schools in most of Western Europe, as well as in the United States, is not covering the totalitarian past in a good way. In many schools they don't even reach past the Second World War. But when it comes to how they operate, there are more similarities than differences. If they're Nazi, if they're communist, if they're Islamist or whatever ism they are, they use the same terror, the same kind of jails, torture, rape, whatnot. Well, the relationship is they're totally controlled by the party. The CCP controls the Confucius Institutes. Their leadership is a vice premier or a big important minister and a member of the leadership of the Communist Party. So of course it's all controlled by the Communists. There is nothing in a totalitarian regime done in the country or outside the country that's not controlled by the totalitarian regime. And in the case of China, it's the CCP, the Communist Party. Well, I mean, the local situation in China is not good. China needs to do a lot when it comes to educating children, when it comes to better university education for the broader population. They are not investing in that because it's not been interesting for the Communist Party to do that. The Communist Party has one main interest: stay in power, keep the privileges for those who are more equal than others, like George Orwell wrote in the Animal Farm. Some are more equal than others, and this goes for all totalitarian regimes, especially communist regimes, where people are supposed to be equal. A lot of the leftist intelligentsia in Europe are still thinking that the communist idea by Marx was good, but it went wrong. I'm absolutely convinced that the idea was wrong, because already in Marx's writings there is written about using terror to keep the dictatorship in place. And this is exactly what they're doing. So they're not interested in educating children unless they believe that that education will serve their purposes. And of course the people are demanding more and more as they get more wealth from the raw capitalist economy that they have. And this means that they need to give in for some of the pressure from the people. There are more protests in China than most people believe. They're ongoing all the time about little things and big things, and that scares the hell out of the Communist Party, if you excuse my wording. Of course, because they don't like people thinking for themselves, and they're afraid of any opposition, especially if the opposition comes public. They try to gather influence over the curriculum. They try to influence the students, teachers, and they try to gather information. They wanted to establish themselves in the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm some years back, moved from the university when there was a conflict there. When I was in Parliament asking why we were housing a communist organization in the Stockholm University, they wanted to move to the Institute of Technology, which had been a disaster, because that's where a lot of the research about the Swedish Air Force is done, and Swedish air defense. Everything is very secret at the Institute of Technology. They have some open institutions also, but they have a special institution for aerodynamics, which are totally military. So I wouldn't like to have a foreign power involved in there. They're trying to do that all the time. Some universities now have realized the real methods and the real wishes of the Confucius Institutes. So, and that's good. They are not going to be in the Stockholm University anymore. Already they terminated all the cooperation, which was about time. A few years too late, but still. They have been there 10 years. But that was on the Faculty of Language, so they couldn't do much harm there, but the harm they did was, of course, influence. Not much to spy on there, where you have a lot of professors looking into old Latin or old Greek texts. Well, of course, they want to influence the foreigners. The very idea, and it is in writing also in Communist Party documents, if you go and do some research. It's not easy in an ongoing system, but you can see it in a past system. We have the example in East Germany, the communist part of Germany that was controlled by the Soviet Union after the Second World War up until the Berlin Wall fell, where the Stasi, the secret police, did a lot of job in order to influence foreign nations. For example, it was just revealed in the archives now that hundreds, 600-700 Swedish teachers, German teachers, were invited in for free, paid for by the communist regime, to take classes and get indoctrinated in Eastern Germany. That explains a lot what I and people my generation experienced in high school. Why the teachers were so communist leaning in ideas. That was probably done by the Soviet Union. It was done by other communist countries, including China, and it's worth tons of money for a totalitarian regime in order to have people getting good experience. Oh, we learned Chinese for free. We got some cultural exchange. They paid my trip to Beijing. All these are valuable propaganda gains that the regime will have. Even good democracies have exchange like that. The United States is having exchange in a good way, but they promote free thinking in their programs. When it comes to the communist and other totalitarian regimes, they try to create Homo Sovieticus or Homo Communisticus in order to make people think or stop thinking and just accept what the party says is right or wrong. So it's worth all the money and more, most likely, for them. And the universities are stupid accepting it. Well, it's a paradox because, of course, the communists hate the ideas of Confucius, and they have been stating for decades that that's totally irrelevant and wrong and whatnot. But they use Confucius for propaganda purposes because they want a brand name. I mean, we live in a modern world, a globalized world, where the brand name states if an organization is good or bad. There was one professor in one article I read who said you shouldn't think you can go out and market China with having a Mao Zedong Institute. That would not be very good for communist China. So they use Confucius, and it's only a play. I would ask them if they want to keep their academic freedom or not. Are they for or against academic freedom? If they're for, that's not an option. If they're against, well, fine, then they can be part of the Chinese communist government. What research do they have? Is it something worth stealing? Then they can still send it on an email to China directly, instead of having the trouble of having a Confucius Institute steal it bit by bit. If they have nothing worth stealing, then it's only the propaganda, which is bad enough. No, I don't think so. If you open your eyes, it's not an overreaction. It's an underreaction all the time, not seeing the real danger behind. If people are so naive so they don't understand who they're dealing with, it's a problem. If they don't see that this is dangerous, if you bother to ask the teachers some political questions about China, it will be obvious for anyone that these people are paid for and controlled by the CCP. It would take 5 minutes to find out if you just took the time doing that. Well, it depends. They are recruiting, of course. Some of them are only teachers, but some of them also belong to the security services, and they are good at recruiting spies. If you infiltrate an organization good enough, it's dangerous for the whole organization. The thinking changes. Or if the university are doing technical research or things like that that can be useful, they will do spying for that. Industrial espionage can be done at the university, if not military. Some universities do military research. Today a lot of the industrial espionage is as important. So it depends who befriends whom, because you do cultivate people. A clever intelligence operator will work exactly that way. I don't think they isolate themselves socially. I think they go to parties, networking here and there. That's in the playbook. The Chinese Communist Party are not interested in their students being educated here or in the States or elsewhere to be too much influenced, so they realize what's going on in China. Some of them do, but they are too afraid because of family reasons and other reasons to become active opposition. But some of them do, and some of them defect and stay actually. So they're trying to control them as well. Some are recruited for money. Honey traps are used everywhere by secret service agencies. You cannot have contracts prohibiting people from belonging to certain organizations. If you have your employer says that you may not belong to Falun Gong, that's illegal. That's totally illegal in most Western countries. Absolutely in the States and Canada, definitely in most European countries. That kind of provision cannot be done, and it should and can be prosecuted immediately. Any prosecutor could do it. I'm surprised it's not been tried.